Hello, I want to welcome Sage to the show. Welcome
Hi.
to Live Life by Design. Thanks for
Excited
being
to be
here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from? What are you doing? What's life all about right now?
I grew up in Las Vegas, but have been in Utah for 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
Do you say you're from Utah, or do you still claim Vegas as home?
I think I still claim Vegas.
Yeah.
Like with my whole childhood being there, I don't feel like I can relate to people who are from Utah.
All right.
But I call Utah home.
Got it. And where specifically in Utah? Are you up north, or where are you?
I've been a little bit everywhere. I went to school, Utah State, up
Okay.
in Logan. Was in Salt Lake area, Utah County. And then Heber. I'm in Wellsville right now, and actually just closed on a house. I moved tomorrow.
Oh,
too.
nice. Congrats.
Anyway,
And you're busy, and you're doing the show right before moving day. I
Oh,
like that.
yeah,
I
it
love
was
the
great.
commitment. That's cool.
I actually planned it around. You said this, and so we moved to tomorrow. That's great.
So why Utah State? You're from Vegas. You choose Utah State, kind of a smaller town, Cache Valley.
Yeah.
Why Utah State? What drew you to it?
I did a few tours of colleges in California and Utah. I wanted to get out of the state of Nevada. Wanted to go somewhere. I actually didn't have a lot of family in either place. I wanted somewhere where I could drive home if I wanted to. And Utah State just has this community and culture to it where it kind of welcomes people to be their own person, but you feel supported in that. And I just was really into outdoors then. My dad raised me doing a lot of like rock climbing and stuff. And so having a big outdoor focus with just a bigger campus.
And why do you say that? Why do you say that it kind of allows you to be who you are? Like what triggers that? What sponsors that, if you will?
Yeah, I think at Utah State, there's a lot of people who go there who, maybe they just don't have, I don't know, maybe an end goal in mind yet. And so they're trying to figure it out alongside a lot of people who have it figured out and know exactly what they want to do. Like the engineering program, people go in and they know exactly what they're going to do. The business program. There's also a lot of people who they want to kind of experience the culture and understand what they want to do. And it allows for this really fun, like creative environment.
Got it. What's the main emphasis at Utah State? What's like their main department? Is it?
They've been investing a lot in the business school lately.
Business school.
So yeah, a lot of expansion there, a lot of growth and focus for both undergrad and then graduate program.
Did you do graduate work as well, or mainly just undergrad?
I did, but I went kind of the online route during COVID actually. So I got an MBA through LSU.
LSU.
Yeah.
Wow, Louisiana State University.
Yep. Still
So,
never been there, but I
That's
did it all.
good. So why LSU?
They didn't require a GRE, and they also had a nonprofit focus that I considered back and forth going in between. I'm sure we'll get into it.
Was it an MBA or an MPA?
It was an MBA, but they also had an MNA, which was a Master's of Nonprofit Administration, which was
Okay.
very specific. And so I applied with trying to decide between the two, but I always loved the corporate balance of understanding nonprofits and focusing on partnerships with companies. And I really wanted to go into kind of long-term, what does it look like on making a difference in the nonprofit space through companies. And so ultimately I decided to do an MBA.
Got it. Okay, so I understand that, you're setting the table there. So now let me ask you this question. Why the world of nonprofit? Like what drew you to that? What still draws you to it?
That's a good question. All growing up, I wanted to be in healthcare. I loved the idea of being able to help someone while, doing a career that you're spending significant time on, 40 plus hours a week. I wanted to do something that even when I wasn't motivated every day, there was still something that felt good about going to work. And so I actually did fully like healthcare focus. I was considering PT school. I was considering like, do I even want to go to medical school? That was a no.
And then
for
what
me.
drew
And
drew
then-
you to that? Like fully, like I
Yeah.
know it's helping people, but
But
why
is that
healthcare?
next
Yeah.
step? I started working at a hospital as a PT assistant, and then I started working at a nonprofit that was physical therapy related, but specifically on neurological injuries. So they looked at the healthcare system and said, something's broken here. There are people who have spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, strokes, who they're not receiving adequate attention from insurance companies or hospitals. We want to fill this gap. And so I actually went there still in school and fully intended to go to PT school after, and I watched all of these physical therapists who were working so hard every day. They were seeing 8 patients a day, every single day, 5 days a week. And I started helping on kind of the back end operation stuff, fundraising events. And I saw it as, if I go into the nonprofit space, I'm not just helping 8 patients a day, I'm helping that team of 10 or 15 therapists help 8 patients a day. And so it just felt like a way to make a bigger difference, I think. And from there, I've gone down the nonprofit rabbit hole, I guess, ever since.
So how did that rabbit hole start? What was your first venture in the nonprofit world?
Yeah. So after that one, where I really enjoyed the fundraising side, I decided I kind of think I want to dabble in understanding what fundraising looks like from the biggest scale I can. So I looked at every nonprofit in Utah, and I found the biggest one and applied. So it's
Can you name that?
LDS Philanthropies. So it was all of the LDS church schools, so like every BYU school, all 5 of those, as well as their humanitarian work, their family search side. They were, raising hundreds of millions a year. And this was outside of like the 10% tithing. This was additional. And so I got to see how it looked on a huge scale with millions of donors and people who were really involved and engaged, and got to see exactly how it looked like having a couple hundred employees compared to, a couple dozen employees.
So how much, and maybe you want to answer this, maybe you don't, but how much do you feel like you've helped raise throughout the years since day one?
Ooh.
Ballpark. And if you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer. I don't know if that's a proper question to answer in your space.
I mean, the thing is, it's like...
But it sounds like it's a lot that you've been able to participate in.
I don't like taking credit for, especially places like LDS Philanthropies, where it's such a group effort.
Sure.
I was on a team of like 8 people. I had a great team of people who I was able to manage and bring up, and a lot of their work contributed to that. But things that I've like touched and been involved in, dozens of millions, I'd say. I don't know if I've eclipsed 100 million, but...
Yeah, it's pretty cool that, it probably doesn't matter. Right? That dollar amount, what matters is the impact that those dollars coming in are making. So that's probably what I would assume you keep more score on.
Yes, you nailed it.
So you leave LDS Philanthropy, right? Mm-hmm. And then where do we go to next?
So I actually really missed the small nonprofit side. I missed looking at...
Sorry, is it because of the bureaucracy? Is it just too...
Yeah, it's too organized. It's too streamlined. It's kind of defined as like stay in your swim lane. So there are certain things that you do and don't expand beyond that. And I really wanted to challenge my creativity, I guess, and I felt like there were other ways that I could do it differently, more authentically. And I also really missed very cause-based organizations, small startup, having to like fight and feel this grit of working towards something that meant a lot. And this was right around the time that honor code stories started coming out. So a lot of people were talking about their really difficult experience with sexual assault and sexual violence.
And I don't think I'm very familiar. So what is honor code stories?
So it was basically everyone started talking toward the experience that they had at BYU, toward either like a professor, a bishopric member, another student, their experience with some kind of sexual violence or sexual harassment or sexism that they had experienced. There were a lot of other themes related to like dress code, kids being kicked out because they confided to their bishop about, hey, I was raped. And they ended up being kicked out of school because they broke the honor code. And it wasn't...
Even though they were the victim.
Yes. And so that was something that was very, like, obviously problematic on the fundraising side. But I remember going home and just, like, crying for these women. Like, I felt so much of a tie toward, I want to be able to help these women. And I didn't know how, I didn't know why. But it just felt like something that meant a lot. And around that time, actually, I had a good friend in the fundraising space who referred me to the executive director of Elizabeth Smart Foundation. And they reached out to me and offered me the chief philanthropy officer role, where I could just come in and start fundraising, building a whole donor program for this nonprofit that they were doing exactly what I felt passionate and tied to. So very.
Isn't it crazy how the pieces of the puzzle all come together in life?
It all ends up kind of, it just felt so right to leave.
Because I'm assuming you weren't really even involved in that type of, like, vertical, right? With abuse and fundraising in that regard. It was more other efforts of philanthropy. Then you see this issue that arises through your efforts of raising for these other causes.
Yeah.
And then now that becomes more of your holy cause with the whole Elizabeth Smart Foundation.
Completely. Like, it was something that I immediately felt tied to from day one. It was something that I wanted to fight on every level. There's something that they say, the Ford Foundation says it really well, actually, that there are two types of, I guess, nonprofits in the world. There's one kind that it's based on people giving generously, and that they're giving generously to those who need it. So they're looking at someone who's homeless and they want to contribute to a homeless shelter so they have a place to sleep. They look at a child who doesn't have food, so they contribute to a food bank so that child can have food. And then there's another type of nonprofit and another type of donor who wants to be involved, where it's systems-based, it's justice-based. They're looking and they say, why is that person homeless? They look and they see, why does that child not have food? And how can we actually fix the systems in place to change that? And so that's when I really first started seeing that side of philanthropy and that side of the nonprofit space of, we need to not just like help survivors of sexual abuse, which there are, millions right now who need help.
What are the ratios? Like, because I went to an event and you and Elizabeth Smart were presenting, and I can't remember all the figures, and I apologize for that. But they're dismal. I remember they're crazy. So what are some of those stats as far as like abuse is concerned?
Yeah, it's...
one out of how many women?
It's mind-boggling. 1 in 3 women will experience sexual violence in their lifetime. And so every single person...
And not to get descriptive, but define what would categorize violence? Is it like full rape? Like...
Sexual violence is kind of like an umbrella term that includes childhood sex abuse, which we can talk about that. Sexual exploitation, so any sort of victimization of a woman. Their pictures were taken and put on OnlyFans, things like that. Sexual harassment, and then unwanted sexual touch, things like that. So sexual violence encompasses all of that. To talk about...
Well, if you think of all the ways in which... people can violate, it's crazy. Like, it's not, it's just, there's so many different ways. It's scary stuff. So 1 out of every 3. 1 out of every 3.
And then statistically, so 1 in every 5 children before they turn 18 will experience sexual abuse. That also includes sexual exploitation, so it includes online as well. If you're talking physical touch, it's 1 in 7 nationwide. And those are reported numbers.
Imagine what's not reported.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Have you done estimates of what you think it would be if everything was reported? Like, how scary is that number?
People have said they believe that sexual violence, it's more likely close to 1 in 2.
1 in 2.
And kids, about 1 in 4 to 1 in 3.
So what do we do to protect our children, to protect ourselves from that occurring? How do we make sure that the system is more intact so that we don't have to keep falling victim to this? What are some best practices there?
Sex education early. A lot of kids who experience sexual abuse when they're really young, they don't even know what's happening to them. When you think like growing up in Las Vegas, I think received sex ed in school at 16. Most childhood sex abuse happens first under the age of 10. And so you think about...
And is it usually the 10-year-old with a 10-year-old, or is it an adult with a 10-year-old, or is it a mixture of both?
Almost more, I think it's over half are child on child. So usually it's an older child with a younger child. And then a lot of times, so 90% of the time it's someone that you know. So that includes... family members, usually a parent, aunt, uncle, cousin, something like that. Someone who comes, stays in the house. We still have like coaches, teachers, any adult in a level of trust. That's where it happens most often.
An affinity type situation where there's that level of quote unquote trust, so the guard is down.
Yeah.
That's wild. Well, it reminds me of that movie Abducted in Plain Sight.
Yes.
Like that, I watched that thing and I was like, I cannot believe that this is reality. It's like we often say, reality is stranger than fiction because you cannot make that up. As crazy as that show is, if you haven't seen the show, be like,
it doesn't get
caution,
crazier,
but it's a crazy, crazy show. I think it's on Netflix.
Yeah.
But again, it's education. It allows you to know like what's out there, so you can be that much more guarded.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you elaborate more? Because I think some of our listeners, viewers, do not understand the Elizabeth Smart story. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah.
And explain what you did there and kind of what that foundation is doing to help fix the system?
Yeah, I love the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. So Elizabeth Smart, she was born and raised here in Utah. When she was 14, she was kidnapped, abducted from her house in the middle of the night in her bedroom, and she was held hostage for 9 months.
And explain how the abduction occurred. Was it like a window was left open from some worker or something like that?
It was crazy. It was like her mom had burned some potatoes that she was making, and so she opened the window just a little bit. And usually, they have a security system in place, but it was like triggered because that window was open, and that man had set his sights on Elizabeth after seeing her. And
we know who the guy is, right?
Mm-hmm. And he's in prison for life,
Okay.
which is great. It's needed, and it's honestly, unfortunately, not.
Okay, so this guy knew who Elizabeth was. Was he a guy working on the property or something like that? Wasn't he a laborer or something?
He did, yes, temporary. I think he did one job for them.
Okay, one job. Put his eyes on her.
Yeah.
And then was he just like scoping out the place day in and day out to figure out his opportunity?
Yeah, there was the opportunity that was there, and he came in with a knife and held a knife up to her neck and basically said,
Were the parents home?
don't yell. Yep. And her sister was actually sharing a bed with her at the time.
And then her parents wake up.
No.
So taken out of the home, nobody knew about it until they discovered that the bed was empty.
Yeah. And she was only taken, it's about 5K, 3 miles away. She was held in the mountains for months, 3 miles from where, she was taken, and they had helicopters, they had search parties. And yeah, she was held for 9 months. She was taken to California.
9 months.
9 months. And then she kind of played him at his own game, and she, took charge and said he was very religiously focused. He felt like he was called of God to do all of these things, and so she.
Well, wait, what does that even mean? Like, what was it called?
That he was essentially the next prophet, and so he was to take on I think 7 wives.
Like what? Like LDS type stuff?
He wrote his own scripture. I'm sure there were LDS ties in there. I just honestly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just a massive suspension of reality.
Yeah.
Was he obviously he's clinically and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so he thinks he's prophet.
Yeah.
Was he trying to get more girls too?
He was actually, and he the very first day actually married Elizabeth, so he did a marriage ceremony with her and claimed him as his second wife.
He was married.
So yes, his wife Wanda was the accomplice, helped kidnap Elizabeth, and she's actually out now. She is out of jail, wandering free.
Kids?
No.
No kids.
Actually, don't quote me on that. I think
okay.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. What time of day, what time of night did this occur, the abduction?
It's 2 a.m., I think.
2 a.m.
And, sometime in the middle of the night. And then
goes in, takes her to the woods, the wilderness, whatever, right? Were they in some sort of shack, tent? What was the setup?
He had built this full tent area, and then
in preparation for this.
They were preparing for months. They even
so Wanda was very
Wanda
involved.
was there.
She was there the whole time.
Yeah. They even had a chain attached to a tree that they cuffed onto Elizabeth, so she could pretty much reach a bathroom area and her tent and.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Anyways, it was crazy. She ended up being rescued back here in Salt Lake after.
Okay. And I interrupted
No,
you
go
when you
ahead.
were talking about she kind of beat him to his own demise type of thing.
Yeah.
Explain that. And was she 15 at the time?
So
had
she
the
was
birthday?
kidnapped when she was 14. And so, yeah, she had her birthday. She was 15. And she had essentially said that she felt like God was telling them they should go back to Utah to take on an additional child.
Utah. I thought they were in Utah.
So they went to California and then back.
Okay.
They went to California for the winter and lived there.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, sounds
In the
lovely,
sunshine.
right? And so she convinced him to go back to Utah. She felt like it was her highest chance of being recognized.
So she said, I had a vision. We all need to go back to Utah. Okay.
Yeah. And she was walking down, it was actually in Sandy, walking down, I think, Main Street there, and someone saw something that they recognized and just didn't look right. She was in like a fake wig and dirty clothes and fake sunglasses, and they called the police. And yeah, she was rescued in June. March. It was June to March. And yeah, the crazy thing about her story is a lot of survivors look toward her. She has, a very happy family. She has, wonderful husband, 3 wonderful kids. She's really the epitome of healing. And something that she says a lot is she was rescued very publicly from a kidnapper. She was raped every single day, and it was proven in court, and now her abuser is behind bars for the rest of his life. It is so different than any other survivor story. A lot of them, it was by a parent, it was by an uncle, it was by someone who is very, well known in the community, and if someone were to share that story, they wouldn't be believed, and they likely wouldn't get the same level of justice. And so that's why Elizabeth created this foundation. Her story, kidnapping, being held hostage, being rescued alive, those are all, 1 in a million chances. Those are very rare. But the sexual violence side, the hardest part of her story, is something that happens to, 1 in 3 women. And so that's what the foundation really focuses on. And it's done a lot of good. And I was really honored to work with her in that time. And we still get to work on projects together now, even. But she and her team, like the amount of work that's needed to be done is incredible.
And thanks for sharing all that. That's what an amazing, it's a sad yet amazing story. And I'm just glad that she's doing what she's doing now, just to create that awareness and to try to obviously fix this broken system, this broken thing that is happening, and to create that awareness. This only gets fixed if there's massive awareness out there, right?
Yeah.
So just so I understand, so what does that foundation do?
Yeah.
And is it a global footprint, or is it more of a nationwide footprint? How big is the cause, if you will?
They're global supporters, definitely. I think strongest nationwide. And the purpose is looking at how to address sexual violence and support survivors of it through education,
aftercare,
and advocacy. So they do, self-defense for women, and that's actually seen more as a preventative measure of just teaching confidence, teaching women to understand red flags. Prior to that happening, she actually has a podcast where she talks about a lot of things out.
Can you name the podcast so that our
Yes.
listeners and viewers can tune in?
Called Smart Talks.
Smart Talks, kid.
Fun name, right?
Cool.
Play on words. And then she has her We Believe You campaign. So that really comes from helping survivors feel loved, believed, and supported, and then sharing how community members can help. It's as simple as believing a survivor and offering to help when someone confides in you.
Okay, so you mentioned that a few times, believing a survivor, and then you mentioned that if a person who's the abuser is a high-ranking person in the community or any organization, that might be a part of some sort of affinity.
Yeah.
Like, I probably can come up with the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you. Like, why does that occur? Why do we not believe the victims of people that were abused by somebody who's high profile? Like, what's happening there?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons. One is doubt. I mean, it's someone who's powerful, who maybe has a lot of attention or money, something that someone would want. So they say they're doing this for attention, they're doing this for a settlement, they're doing this for money. Also, I mean, something that I say a lot is privilege is invisible to those who have it. Those who are in higher connections, they are oftentimes the ones who can take advantage of women and get away with it. They have this, typically it's men, 98% of sexual violence is at the hands of a man. And so, trying to remember exactly who said this, but basically men tend to believe other men, women believe other women. Our goal is to get everybody involved in believing the survivor. I think people can see it from their side and try and look at the best in people, and so we're trying not to do that and look at the survivor.
So me as a husband, as a father, right? What are some best practices if, one of my kids or one of my kids' friends comes to me? Like, what would be some best practices so that I make sure that I'm not falling into the traps of preconceived notions of, oh, they're just trying to get attention, or like what can I do to make sure that I'm not another number of people that are just not believing the survivors, if you will?
Don't jump into questions first, because it feels like they're not being believed. So if you say, where were you? What were you wearing is a big one.
So avoid those questions.
Don't ask questions first. I believe you. I support you. I love you. How can I help you? Be that sounding board first. Let them speak it the way that they want, that's comfortable. Don't convince them to do anything. Like, don't say you need to go stand up to them. Let me go talk to that person. Don't do any of those things. Let the survivor guide kind of their experience in telling you first, and be calm, rational, and supportive first. And then by gaining that trust of them, they'll be able to talk with you more. They'll say, hey, I think I want to go to the police now. I feel ready. Those steps will come.
Okay, so they approach me. I just reinforce what they're saying. I believe you. I love you. How can I help you? Is that proper?
Yeah, that's great.
And what else should I say, or what else should I not say? Because I think the first thing I would, who did it? Where was it? What happened? Tell me exactly what occurred, or are you sure? You know what I mean?
Yes. Alongside those questions, I think we've all heard that healthy relationship thing about marriages, where it's, are you wanting, to solve problems, or are you just wanting comfort? So understanding what they're wanting when they say, how can I help you? If there's like, I just need to vent right now, they're likely, needing that time and that safe place to talk to. When they're in a better headspace later, just like, hey, I was really thinking about this. I want to make sure that you feel like I'm a safe and comfortable person to talk to. Is there anything that I can do to help you? If you decide to go to the police, like, I can go with you. I'm happy to help on that side of things. If you're wanting to address this person specifically, like, let's talk through what that could look like, which I don't recommend, but just hearing what they're wanting to do, being that sounding board, reinforcing them, and then offering to help them.
Okay.
What they're needing.
Is when they're ready and they say, I want to go to the police, is that a good strategy? Should you retain counsel as well, or first, or
if they're under
what do you
the
recommend?
age of 18, go to a children's justice center, a children's advocacy center. They're named, and it's the same thing, but just named differently based on the state. And that's where they have everyone to handle a case of child sex abuse. And so they have a forensic nurse, they have an interviewer, they have like police contact to get everything filed. They have everything that they need. And if they're an adult, I strongly recommend that someone goes with them, because something that we've noticed is law enforcement, not everyone is trauma-informed trained. They don't understand maybe the best questions or how to.
I would almost say none of them are.
Yeah.
Be my response.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it's
something that they need to look into for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so go to those state-sanctioned specialists for child abuse and trauma, or sexual abuse and trauma.
Mm-hmm. For physical abuse.
Physical abuse and trauma. You can just Google it, I'm assuming, and
they have one in almost every county.
Every county. And then let the experts, do you feel like these people are pretty well prepared for what they're facing on a daily.
Yeah.
Good resource, what they do.
All day.
Okay. And then go there and then start figuring things out and etc. Now, that's super helpful to know. I mean, it might even be good to just have that information already on your cell phone since it happens so readily. That way you're that much more well equipped. And maybe even research on your own what these organizations do so that when that does occur, you know, you have that info. It's like I always say, knowledge is power. It's the application of knowledge that's power. So just knowing how to apply the knowledge of all these tools that are readily available to us. It's almost like if you're starting to search where your closest ER is during a trauma or during an emergency, that's not good.
It's not.
You should already know your routes. I mean, I remember one of my pets got basically attacked by another neighboring dog, and luckily, with your brain is all over the place. You're kind of in a fog of war. But luckily, I already knew my route to the vet. I knew exactly where to go, so I could have kind of that ice in my veins, knowing exactly how I could rescue my dog. Literally, if I wouldn't have made it when I made it to the animal hospital, my dog wouldn't have survived. So it's just one example of just how preparation, can help us.
Yeah.
Okay, so how long did you work with the Elizabeth Smart Foundation?
So 3 years.
3 years. Cool.
3.5 years. Yeah.
And then you pivoted. You're somewhere else now.
Yes.
If you don't mind, tell us where you are now and what you're working on.
So, with Elizabeth Smart Foundation, I helped to lead a merge of another foundation that focused on sexual exploitation and trafficking prevention, called Maloof Foundation. And so
those two foundations merged?
Yes.
And why would they merge? Like, what's the advantage of merging?
Yeah. So there's several reasons. One is strengthen programs. And so when you have multiple resources, being able to advocate towards several programs for the same cause, it gives survivors kind of the opportunity to understand what's available to them. They also had a lot of resources in regards to Maloof Foundation was parented by a very significant company called Maloof Companies. They had owned several companies, and the foundation was kind of a passion project of theirs. So we had a lot of resources. We had access to a legal team, a marketing team, a graphic design team. We were no longer scrapping by when we were, having a Dr. Oz show with Elizabeth and trying to create a graphic for it with like our little team.
Sure.
And then
So you kind of went from a big org to a small org to now a big org again, right?
Yeah. I mean, the foundation was small, but the company was big. And I was able to learn a lot.
Okay, so the nucleus of the foundation was still entrepreneurial enough, but you had all these resources of a big scale company, but you still had the autonomy and authenticity of a small org. Is that?
Yeah, you nailed it,
Okay.
Which was really fun, actually. Working on the corporate side was something that I loved being able to do. I mean, an example that's dumb, but there's kind of these win-win-win solutions everywhere of how does it benefit the company, how does it benefit the nonprofit, and how does it benefit the end consumer. And so, one of the companies that they owned was a bedding company. And we were talking through overstocked product that they had and products that weren't doing well. And so it was even conversations of, hey, we have this pillow that's overstocked. It's blue. It was to represent cooling or whatever. Let's use that for Anti-Trafficking Awareness Month. The color for that is blue. Let's have 20% of proceeds be donated to the foundation. And, let's sell overstocked products. So there are a lot of opportunities to look at kind of these intersections of how can we benefit the company and the nonprofit together. And, even things like, hey, we had a self-defense program. Now we have a huge company of 500 people to take the self-defense class who will sign up. So just a lot of fun intersections there that gave a lot of opportunity of me looking at nonprofits in even a bigger and different way, I guess.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about corporate structures and nonprofits. How do they work, and how do you come to terms with running a nonprofit versus a for-profit, and how you make sure that it's still, like, you don't lose the essence of the nonprofit, but you still have to run a business. Like, you still have some sort of bottom line.
Yeah.
You still have to get revenue to be able to cover your G&A. So how does the corporate structure work, and how do you come to terms of actually running a nonprofit versus a profit?
Yeah. That's a good question. And I think it's really complicated for companies who don't really understand what they want to do in the nonprofit space. It's kind of like a fun passion project for them, because whenever that happens and they inevitably go through an ebb and flow of lower revenue, that's the first thing to go, right? They're not funding that anymore. And so you really have to find a balance of what strengthens your company through what the nonprofit is doing. A great example is Visionary Homes. They're a home builder here in Utah, I think the fourth largest. And we talked with them about what we were doing as a nonprofit. They felt really engaged and kind of touched by this. They never had like a solid nonprofit structure, didn't have a specific one that they donated to every year. And so they took on us as their charity of choice. And then they did like a really fun event where they announced it. They got their all of their employees involved. I think they brought like 100 people, 100 of their employees to come and learn about what we were doing. And then they actually allowed their employees to volunteer back. So one of the programs that we had was it would renovate bedrooms for kids who are sexually abused. A lot of kids, especially if they were sexually abused in their own bedroom, their bedroom holds a lot of trauma and a lot of pain, especially if you wake up from nightmares, things like that. And so we wanted to bring choice back, give them the opportunity to design their own safe place in their bedroom. And so we worked with a home builder to literally help rebuild these kids' bedrooms, everything from paint and lighting and doors and all of that. And so they were able to volunteer there. They also were able to raise money. And it was something that it doesn't really cost them a lot. You know, it's volunteer hours. They also did a golf tournament where they raised money for us every year. And it was really cool because they would buy all their trade partners. All their trade partners would buy a team, and proceeds were all donated to us. So it was not only strengthening their business with their employees and their partners and all the people who they needed to make their business successful, but it was also showing them, hey, we're about more than just profits. And it really strengthened not only that, but it also benefited the foundation. And so you have to look at it, I guess, differently. You have to look at it in a creative way of what feels like it's truly authentic with kind of the C-suite execs, the employees, making sure that they're not just, supporting it, but they feel really engaged. And then the customers as well. How does everyone feel supported?
Yeah, if you look at the list of human needs, a couple of human needs are, connection, love, significance, contribution.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard this quote many times over, but some people are so poor, all they have is money. And if a company is just about the bottom line and revenue chasing day in and day out, you're not going to have a long, sustainable company that's worth, writing about, talking about. So I think it's brilliant that companies are able to get out of the minutia of the driving of the profits and the bottom line and actually get into something that gives them significance and contribution, because that's what employees are looking for.
Yes, exactly.
Money's a commodity. They can make money in any venture, any company. But where it really keeps the employee base sticky and committed and feeling like they're doing something that's making a difference is that human need of the significance, contribution, love, etc. So yeah, that's really cool. That's really brilliant. I've been a part of companies before where we're kind of like all over the place. Like we're helping this humanitarian aid over here. We're helping this charity group over there. And it just felt so fragmented. And you know how it is when you're trying to help everybody, you end up helping more of nobody. I'm sure we made small impacts, but I've always been of the opinion where if you can get sheer focus on one cause, you can create a lot more momentum and a lot more good instead of just sprinkling all over the place. In fact, sometimes we'd go to other countries and do some charity work, and I'm thinking, we're moving all these human resources out here. We're here for like a week, and then what? There's no follow-up. Yeah. They'll never see me again. And in my mind, I'm wondering, am I actually creating more of a problem than a solution? Because once I leave, it's like, what's the aftercare? What's the follow-up? What's the follow-through? Like we gave them this hope, and all of a sudden we're gone, and we don't have like something that's perpetual or long-lasting. So I love that example of. Remind me of the home company and the construction
Visionary
company.
Homes.
Visionary Homes. So is it their homes that they do the remodeling for, or can it be any home?
Any home.
So they'll go in there and say, hey, we're going to remodel your bedroom.
Yeah.
This is the color palette you can choose from.
Oh, well, let them choose anything.
Choose anything.
Yeah.
And then they provide it all pro bono?
Yeah.
Or is it just the hours? Do they actually provide all the...
They've provided everything.
That's crazy. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I think something that's really important to remember is that I think at some point it has to be related to your company's mission.
I agree.
Too, right?
Yeah, it has to kind of be able to blend in.
Yeah.
So that it's easy. There can't be that rub. If it doesn't feel right, it's not going to be evergreen. It's not going to be long lasting. It's got to somehow fit with whatever the core values are or whatever the specialization is of that company. So Visionary Homes, that's brilliant what they're doing. I love that.
It was great. I mean, even solar, for example, there's a solar company, Radix. They have, obviously, door-to-door sales.
Yeah. I know all those guys really well.
They decided to invest in doing On Watch, which is an anti-trafficking training. It only takes about an hour, but it's how to look out for signs of trafficking in the United States. And so it's very different than what people imagine in other countries where you're just, kidnapped away from your family. Trafficking looks very different here. And so with them training every single one of their door-to-door sales team, they actually were able to go in every single door they knock on. They're educated now on how to look out for those signs of trafficking. And so even though it's not, solar equals trafficking, there are people in front of thousands of doors. How can we have them make a positive impact and actually look out for something that could save someone's life?
Have you heard of any stories in which that strategy has actually helped save some lives or reduce the victimization?
With Radix, I haven't followed up on that, so I'm not sure on that one. We did have a survivor of trafficking speak to their group who she was being trafficked by a trucker, long haul truck driver, and it was actually the owner of the trucking company who realized something was wrong, saw something, and helped her escape that situation. So it's just understanding what to look for.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
No, a buddy of mine who did quite a bit of voluntary work with the Malou Foundation and with Elizabeth Smart Foundation told me, because I once told him that I was going to go visit a country. I'm not going to name the country to not be disrespectful to citizens of that country that are watching. But I said, yeah, we're going to go to this country. My wife's a little bit concerned about child trafficking. And he goes, Mendez, you don't get it. Like, you're in Sandy, Utah, Draper, Utah, at a restaurant. There is trafficking occurring at that restaurant and you don't even see it. And sometimes it's happening more here around us than it is in this country that you mentioned. And this guy's really well educated in that. And that I was like, are you serious? And it was hard for me to comprehend it, hard for me to believe it. So maybe elaborate on that a little bit. What's the name of that company again? What is it?
Oh, On Watch.
On Watch. Yep. Okay, so another plug for On Watch. So how much is this happening, like, when we're at restaurants, when we're at the park? Like, how much trafficking would you predict is happening through the statistics that you've studied?
So trafficking is one of the most unknown, I guess, problems statistically. Almost nothing is ever reported. They estimate 1 to 2% of those who are trafficked will be kind of like rescued and have those numbers reported. Trafficking, technically, I guess by like federal law, is defined as the use of force, fraud, or coercion, or if a person is under 18, to perform sex acts against their will. So sex acts could be requiring someone to be on OnlyFans. Sex acts could be requiring someone to do sexual acts.
OnlyFans is still a thing, right?
Yeah.
It's the Madison one that's not a thing anymore, right?
Ashley Madison.
Yeah.
I think that might still be a thing.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
So they coerce you to be on OnlyFans and say, if you don't pay up, I'm going to publish this.
So, what OnlyFans looks like with that coercion is usually they get a child, they get a woman, anyone like that, to go on OnlyFans. They look consensual. They look like they're doing it for themselves. However, there's someone in the middle who's taking all the money. So they're forcing them to go on camera. They're forcing them to, undress on camera, say certain things.
Well, they pay the person.
Things. And then they're having it all go paid to the account. the OnlyFans account, which isn't actually run by the person on camera. It's run by someone else.
Okay, but are they saying, hey, I'll pay you for this? Or is it like, if you don't pay me, then I'll publish it? Or how does it usually work?
I mean, blackmail happens, yeah. So usually it's, use of force, fraud, or coercion. So they're saying, if you don't do this, I'll send these pictures to your school, to your family, something like that. Or if you don't do this, I'll hurt your family. If you don't do this, I'll go to the police and say that you did this. Any sort of, yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you'd be, and I appreciate you sharing that as well. So again, going back to my friend's comment, do you believe it's also occurring at the rate in which he's stating?
Sorry. Yes, 100%. I mean, there's trafficking every single day in Utah.
Did the whole Underground Railroad thing kind of put a sour taste with the Tim Ballard situation and everything?
Yeah, I think so. I think that trafficking became a really catchy type of nonprofit to raise money for. OUR did a really great job with marketing, right? Like, they had people doing CrossFit to raise money to, like, save our children. And they were representing it even with the movie that came out last year, Sound of Freedom, which you should actually go on OUR's website and read what was true in the movie versus what was not. But with what they do...
Is there a lot of fiction?
A lot of Hollywood embellishment.
You know that I actually went to the premiere of that probably 5 years ago in Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got invited. I got invited by one of the donors. He says, hey, Mendez, should come check out this premiere. It's going to be in Hollywood. Small theater, and all the actors, producers, directors were all there. Oh, wow. So I saw the movie like before it hit the big screen. Probably, honestly, 6 years ago now.
Okay. It's a great movie. And it's similar in the way of Taken, that when you explain trafficking, that's what people imagine, right? So they imagine a movie like Taken, they imagine Sound of Freedom, where someone is being ripped from their family and sold in another country. That's not what it looks like here in the United States. In the United States, it looks like someone who goes to school every day and then comes home and their uncle takes them out of bed and sells them. And they go back to school. It looks like kids who are having their parents sell them so they can make ends meet. It looks like...
No way.
Oh, so often. So often.
Like...
Yeah. It also looks like, I think people don't have this full understanding of... They see trafficking as these innocent kids being pulled away, but if they see someone involved in sex work, for example, they say, that woman made her own choices, and they don't want to help. But I've seen so many times these girls who they're working at strip clubs, and then they have, for lack of a better word slip, they have some sort of pimp or some sort of owner of them. There's different words for it. Who then sells them with trafficking. But the reason why they got into that strip club is, there's one example where it was an 18-year-old girl. On her birthday, Christmas Eve, her mom dropped her off and said, we supported you for 18 years. It's your turn to step up and make money for our family. So, there are so many situations where, these girls, women, boys, kids are being forced into trafficking, and you don't understand the back end of it. And in order to actually solve trafficking as a whole, you have to look at every single victim who's experienced it, because all their stories are different. You have to be willing to understand the background of what happened to them, be willing to learn, and be willing to say, how can we stop this from happening? No one human life is more important than another. We're all equal. So we have to look at what happened. We can't just prioritize the, big save our children or OUR style trafficking. We have to look at, the kids who are homeless in the streets of Salt Lake. If you ask any homeless shelter in Salt Lake, how many of these people, especially women, how many of these women who are homeless, who are sleeping in this homeless shelter tonight, have been trafficked or sexually exploited? Without hesitation, I'll say 100%.
Jeez. Okay, tough to have all these columns, but I think they're necessary to have. It's overwhelming. Yeah. It's just insane what's happening, and it's just awareness. So I'm glad we're talking about it. So we are kind of coming to an end of our time, but I want to go over what it is that you're doing now.
Yeah.
I know we started answering that and I interrupted you, as I often do, but what are you working on now and why?
So I'm really excited about what I'm doing now. I work with a family office based in Salt Lake, J.R. Miller Enterprises, and I run the philanthropy side of what they do. And so right now it's split into two major components. One is called Birds for Sophia, so I'm kind of back to my roots in neurological nonprofit healthcare, where we're helping kids in Ukraine who have emergency medical needs. So we provide grants there. We've helped bring 16 kids right now, and 4 currently working on to the United States to get treatment. These are kids where they have a 95% likeliness of dying by age 2 unless we give them a medication that isn't available in Ukraine.
And why is that medication not available in Ukraine?
It's honestly not available it's not available in a lot of countries because it wasn't even FDA approved until 2019. So it's something that you can buy in other countries at the price tag of $2.1 million.
What? Like, I just don't get it.
I mean, it's government. The government would have to pay for the drug from the pharmaceutical company, and with the price tag it's at, it's just something that they don't do.
And then here in the States, that medication, that drug, is how much to the consumer?
So the way that we've been able to do it's actually free, but there are some insurance companies that aren't covering it right now, and so we're trying to understand that a little bit more. But that's one side of what I do, so Birds for Sophia.
Okay, and once they receive this medication, the likelihood of survivorship is?
I mean, it was just FDA approved, but basically it stops all progression of the disease. And so we have kids who they got it a few years ago that they're able to, walk and run around and live happy lives with their families. And it's something that, a parent never would have been able to experience without it, which is really cool.
Kev. And then what's the second component?
So the other component is actually a lot about what we've been talking about today. We have a book that's being published October 15th that shares the story of the Miller family, their experience with sexual abuse when Valerie Miller, she was raped at 13 for about 2 years on and off by a police officer.
By a police officer?
By a police officer in his 30s here in a Utah town. And so they reported to police. Police brushed it off. And it was 50 years later that they did a full investigation, proved everything happened in the state
50
of
years
Utah.
later.
Did an apology. You can actually find it on, KSL. It's all like.
Is the abuser alive?
One of them is.
Oh, multiple.
So there were multiple. So this book talks about everything that happened there and just a lot of the cover-ups and stuff. And so something that we realized is there's a gap in the sexual violence education and healing space, and we're trying to fill that by partnering with incredible organizations like Sophia here in Utah, which is generational impact of sexual abuse. So right now we know that if you are sexually abused growing up, your likeliness of your child being sexually abused is higher.
Why?
There's a lot of reasons. One of those is safety in partners. So you understand safety only at the level that you've been taught it. And so if you grew up with an abusive parent, your likeliness of choosing an abusive parent...
Okay,
Abusive partner.
Okay, now I'm there. Okay.
Yeah, is higher.
Repeat that again. I need to unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
So if I grew up with an abusive parent, more than likely my choice of choosing a partner could emulate that same abusive behavior.
Yeah. It's like, how the enemy is safer than the enemy you don't. Mm-hmm. Statistically, a lot of people choose someone that they feel like they understand that version of them. They understand, that's how they act out, is in sexually violent ways. That's how they act out by yelling. That we see time and time again, a parent who yells at their kids, they end up marrying people who also yell at their kids.
Got it.
But it's more than that. It's also mental health. So individuals who are survivors, they grow up and the likeliness of them experiencing some kind of diagnosed mental health disorder is 91% if they're abused before 18. And so they're experiencing all of these mental health disorders that they're trying to focus on themselves. And with that comes this whole plethora of, they're also raising their kids while dealing with that, right? And so their kids are experiencing a less present parent. They're experiencing a parent who may not react in the best of ways sometimes. And that trauma can be felt also, like addiction is a lot higher in survivors of abuse. And so if you have addiction, your children are more likely to have addiction. We also see, for example, foster care. Foster care, some of the numbers of those who have been sexually abused, if they've touched the foster care system, can be as high as 80-90%.
Kids inside the foster care system by the foster parents?
Or by their parents.
Previous to entering.
Yep. So either
What about the new foster parents? It's occurring there as well?
Yes. Both. Or foster care siblings or in group homes. It can be as high as 90% of girls, and then 71%.
This is so overwhelming. Like, how do you even, I mean, you're in this world, how do you even go about your day knowing that all this is around you? Like,
it's
fair question.
No,
like,
it's wild.
Like, it wants you to fix everything immediately. Like, it wants me to have some magic wand woven.
Yeah. And I think that's why you have to look at systems change. You have to look at the long game just as much as the short.
Because you'd think, okay, foster care, there's a lot of guardrails. They're picking the right parent. They have this massive interview process. These kids should be protected in that system. But it sounds like it's happening in that system. And not just with the parents, but the siblings that they get tied to in the system. Because more than likely they were abused previously as well.
Yep.
Right?
And then you think about it, they age out of the system. They're 18.
And now
they don't have anywhere to go, so their likeliness of being in the trafficking world, they say that 80-90% in certain studies have shown 80-90% of trafficking survivors have at one point been in the foster care system. So if you solve foster care, you solve 80-90% trafficking. And so you look at even that, and then foster care, 71% of girls who leave foster care are pregnant by age 21. So you look at how that cycle can replicate again and again. You look at it, all of that. And so anyways, it's something that...
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, we have to look at.
So how do you not get overwhelmed with all this? Because this is what you do every day. How do you come to terms with all this? Just knowing how much work needs to be done.
I work with the right people, for sure. I want to surround myself with people who want to make a change and who want to be engaged in this. I also have like a great supportive husband who helps kind of just keep things light.
Is he in the nonprofit world as well?
No, he's not. He's in cybersecurity, so different world. But he listens to all my all my stories, and also I spend a lot of time prioritizing being outside. So just getting away, I think it's so easy, especially here in Utah. When you get into the mountains and, you have silence and stillness, and you realize that there are bigger things, right? There are bigger things, and as long as we're working every day toward making a difference, that's as much as I can do. And so just being able to realize that, like, the world is still beautiful and you can still find stillness, and that's honestly what I need.
No, I appreciate that. Love that. What can we do? So what are some resources that we can list off right now from everything we talked about? Birds for Sophia, the Malou Foundation. Give us some takeaways, some things that we could put in our system, in our Rolodex, if you will, where we can say these resources are here. And maybe I would say if you feel like you're being abused right now, if you're a part of it, like, do something about it. Go to people that will listen to you. You can do something about it, and there's resources to help. So leave us with some tools that we can, apply and carry this cause forward with.
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity. So first off, there was something that you mentioned that I felt like is really important. Take 10 minutes, Google some things, and put some numbers in your phone. So first one, National Human Trafficking Hotline.
And can we put this on the screen, please?
So National Human Trafficking Hotline. The RAIN Network, RAINN. So that's a group that helps with sexual abuse, domestic violence, trafficking, and it's a support network 24 hours a day. ElizabethSmartFoundation.org. They do incredible support for survivors of sexual abuse, but also just education and really important tools there. And then definitely look up, children's justice centers in your area. Children's advocacy centers is what they're sometimes called. Birdsforsophia.org is where we work on helping kids who they are quite literally trying to save their lives, and as many as we can. We always need sponsors for these families, as well as just support once they get here.
Do you have any events happening soon that people can attend or anything they can be a part of a community?
We actually have a golf tournament in September 17th, with Birds for Sophia. We'd love anyone to be involved there. And then we have
where is it? Where's
that
the tournament?
one will be up at Birch Creek in Cache Valley.
Cache Valley, Utah. Good.
And then hopefully we'll have 2 more that we can announce soon as well. And then we always have.
And then remind us of the book when it hits and the title so people can buy it.
Yes. So October 15th, the book is called Hometown Betrayal, and it will launch Amazon, ebook, all that fun stuff, October 15th. And we're going to have events leading up to that. We'll have a big book launch day of. It'll be honestly something that I think is really powerful in just understanding how to look out for signs, raise awareness, and make a difference.
Okay, beautiful. I want to end with this. Any final words of wisdom, any final advice, living life by design, everything that we talked about, just send us off with something and then we'll call it a show. Anything you want to leave us with? Any final thoughts?
I think something that just resonates with me is think through decisions, even when it's related to business, on how you can involve something bigger than money and yourself. I think that there's this, we've talked a lot, and not you and me, but just in general, like you've talked about in your podcast, work-life balance and work-life harmony, right? I think that's what you said,
sure.
Work-life harmony. There's this balance in kind of choosing things selfishly, like I have to prioritize myself, you have to prioritize yourself and our families, but also prioritizing other people. And so when making, certain business decisions, when making certain decisions for, where you want to vacation or things like that, think through, is there something I can do to make this help other people? So many times there are. And it's just kind of having this abundant mentality of, how can I make this bigger than this simple decision? Is there something I can do to be bigger than me and my business right now? How can I expand that and help others?
Well, beautiful. So thank you for your beautiful soul. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for sharing everything. You're definitely making a massive difference. I know it's not easy. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm assuming it's not easy. I don't go through all the stuff that you have to go through, but just in talking with you today, it's overwhelming. So I'm sure that you carry that massive burden, just knowing how these lives are being impacted through all this stuff that they're going through. And man, it takes a special person to do what you do. So I just want to let you know publicly, I appreciate you. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.